I guess we'll start with Müge, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Dave. I only have one question. How frequently do you recommend re-evaluating or realigning the RTN network to ensure consistency with the NSRS?
And thank you for the question. I think that's the major issue, that most RTN managers, like Dave said, don't consistently align to the NSRS, and most of them don't. Some of them probably are not well informed on how to go about that. And so, for example, some real-time networks are aligned to the NSRS probably 10 years ago, and some do it twice a year. I remember when I was doing this research and I reached out to a real-time network on how or when was the last time they aligned their network to the NSRS. I think his response was his predecessor did it, and that was like many years ago. And those are like the issues we brought up. It's a very like time-consuming thing, and so that's why we have this tool, and it's part of the NGS grant. And our goal is to make this a national alignment, an RTN alignment tool for the entire nation. And this does the heavy lifting. And so to answer your question, this would do this on a daily basis, or at least technically at the end of every week, it will align your network to the NSRS. Whether you choose to adopt those values as for your real-time networks depend on how well it agrees with your previously adopted values. So we give you the opportunity to weekly align to the NSRS, monitor that daily, but then whether you adopt it at the end of every week versus at the end of every month or at the end of every quarter in a year, like depends on how well your RTN is still aligned to the NSRS.
Okay. Well, Brian, I think you had a couple questions.
Yes, thanks, William. Really interesting research. I was curious if the approach that you developed is scalable to larger networks. So expanding beyond real-time networks, if something like the NOAA CORS Network could potentially be run through this process with thousands of stations. Is that something that seems possible now or in the future?
Yeah, Brian, I would say, so the tool itself, again, this whole alignment and monitoring tool is split into two. So probably for the first part, technically, our goal is to align to the NSRS. And so that automatically, for the first tool, we can't scale it to the NSRS because we'll be aligning to itself. But then the application where that can be scaled to the NSRS is the database, the monitoring part of the tool. And so if you have probably your NOAA CORS network positions, and you have through their processes ways of updating those coordinates, they could pass it through the database and see how well they agree with each other. And it stores a lot more information. There are so many things I didn't mention, but it stores a lot of information about the previous coordinates and your updated coordinates. And so it gives them a lot of like opportunity to monitor how well the course has been doing, like over a long period of time. Yeah.
Thanks, William. Yeah, that'd be really interesting to take a look at in the future, potentially. I have another question on the response time. So you mentioned the basically temporal resolution for how often the networks are adjusted. But I was really curious if there was some sort of sudden misalignment that occurs, what sort of response time would you expect from this automated workflow?
And so the challenge, again, with this workflow is you need to have, per NGS recommendation, 24 hours RINEX file data. And those usually become available the next day. And so you get it in near real time. So you get it the following day because we are doing daily solutions. And so if to detect a misalignment, it will be the following day. And we did this test on actually the earthquake that happened in California. And then we're able to see the misalignments the following day. And you see the gradual shift as the earthquake happens.
Great, thanks, William. It's a really powerful tool.
I have a couple questions. William, you mentioned that you're doing this RTN NSRS alignment tool for NGS. So I guess it'll be available whenever they approve it, or do you have any idea when it'll be? And then once it's available, then it's available to anybody?
So currently, so this project began as research for ODOT. And so we've currently handed it over to ODOT, the Oregon DOT. The rollout is still in process. And as part of this NGS research we are doing, we are trying to develop a real-time network alignment. The goal is to have it as a web tool. Whether how that will be implemented is still yet to be decided, because the research is still ongoing. But the backend, the functions will remain very similar.
Okay. You also mentioned that you have to put it all in RINEX, which is always a pain. So is there any plans to be able to take someone's, if they just got all Trimble data, that then you process it and you run the RINEX, you create the RINEX file, or are you always going to require everybody to actually put everything in RINEX?
I think the answer to that question would be what we end up using as the backend for the processing. And so whether, for example, if we decided to go with MPages, because we use OPUS projects, and OPUS project is going away in the modernized NSRS. So if we decide to use MPages, whether MPages will support those other tools, or if we decided to do a PPP method or use GPX, whether that will be supported. So under that, and so then it depends on what's the backend for the processing will eventually be.
Okay, but now I know OPUS projects, OPUS itself needs to be in RINEX. So I guess my question is, are you thinking about building some kind of tool that will take any of the manufacturer's products and convert it to RINEX? There used to be tools like that out there that you ran, but you always like a separate step. So is there any thoughts of just trying to build that tool into this, so a person that using Trimble or Hashtag or whatever they're using can just run it through their original data?
Hey, can I add to that a little bit?
Sure.
So one of the concerns about us managing that conversion is that these different manufacturers, for example, the Trimbles and the Leicas and all of those similar, like over time, their format of that file changes. And so the challenge with us developing a tool that does that conversion to RINEX for them is that now we have to maintain that backend, right? As Trimble updates their raw binary file format, they change something. Well, now the tool is rendered useless until we fix it. And so the whole point of that RINEX file format was to alleviate that problem. Right?
No, yeah, I realize that.
Yeah, but then so from us, from a perspective of developing this, yeah, it would be great if it made it easier for the user to upload that data. But I also like the idea of making sure the user's doing some QA/QC on their data before they, for example, if this is a tool that NGS is offering, like they need to make sure their data is good before they just give that data to this utility to leverage it, right? And so part of it is, well, we kind of want them to do some QA/QC on their own data, get it converted, and then get it to us in that specific file format. The other thing is this limits the overall processing power that will be needed to be done from the NGS server side. So if NGS is implementing and hosting this, it's going to take a lot more computational resources if it's not only reading in their file, but it's also converting it to a standard file format to then be combined with all this other data. So in theory, the concept of us being able to read in anybody's data and then implement that, it sounds really good, but in the long term, it's adds a lot of challenges to the overall workflow.
Yeah, no,
So,
I hear
yeah.
you, but it's just,
Yeah.
it's just one of those one step that someone has to do, and if there's softwares out there that can able to handle it, it's just one less step. But I do hear you that people should be looking at their data and making sure that they have the right antenna on there, which is one of the biggest issues. And I found that out just working with the Harris Galveston data set, which was labeled wrong. Anyways,
Yeah.
no, I got you. I was just trying to
Yeah.
see if there's a possibility.
Just before that, yeah. So part of what we do, for example, with your antenna type and height issue, and while we run the adjustments, we check all those things. We have the user provide like a file, an Excel file with what the antenna type and height is, and then while we go through the processing, we extract what's in the RINEX header file, and then we compare those. And if there's a conflict, we put that in a log file, or we send an email to the manager that, hey, this is something to check. Yeah. So we have a lot of things inbuilt. And Brian also built a QA/QC2 for the RINEX file. So that gives like an additional check for the RTN manager that running through this tool, you're able to see, even before processing the data, how well the RINEX file is performing. And so, for example, if maybe for a specific day, you're seeing high or residuals, or you're seeing that for a specific day, there's a jump in the, and then maybe it comes down later, you can look at the RINEX file and QA/QC and see that, oh, maybe there was like disturbance, or yeah, something went wrong. Yeah.
Okay. OPUS projects is what seems like you're running, and it makes sense if you're doing something for NGS. If you're dependent upon that, if OPUS projects is down, then you can't do anything. Are you looking at alternatives to run a parallel system with some other thing when OPUS project isn't working?
Yep. We are currently exploring PPP avenues. We have another student who's been working on that. And so the goal eventually, when we do our time series analysis, maybe we augment and have a way to ensemble like this time series, so that when one is unavailable, we can kick in with the other. Yeah.
Good. I guess one last question. I like this, and I like your graphics because it tells you where something's up, and you can look at, say, hey, there's an issue here. So in this software, it kind of highlights it. Maybe this is just for the Oregon network right now. How do you inform users that it's bad, or when you decide to do the update? You see some change there. Is it just basically the 2 and 4 centimeters, or you're looking for, I mean, sometimes they change antennas and they don't tell anybody that they changed antennas, and it makes a difference because it could be using the wrong antenna pattern for the model, or it significantly changed the coordinate because they put the completely different antenna on it, and it's not the same position.
Yeah, I think most of this lies with the RTN manager currently, and they have to, first of all, we give you the opportunity to export whatever you feel. Whenever there's a misalignment and you update this coordinates, you still have to feed it into your RTN managing software to configure your correction stream. And so if you updating within the tool, there's an extra step you need to do where you have to then feed it into your RTN management software, configure to the stream, and then probably release values to the user. And so I think for the first part of your question, they have to be diligent with doing like that work. For when you have to update, I think currently we just, like I said, it's just a flagging system. So we flag it, we tell you that, hey, something is going on with your network. And you have to look at the overall network and your individual time series and determine whether this is just local or this was a one-off thing versus, or this is regional, or I'm just going to update the entire network. But we are still doing research. I'm still currently doing a time series analysis where I'm determining these thresholds dynamically. And then the goal is to find a way to combine these to be able to provide more information to the user or the manager. So make it fully automated, but then still give the control to the manager to be able to make like these decisions. We don't want to update and not like have them involved, else that check like will not be in place where they provide it to the users. If our tool is just updating whenever, they won't be doing that, providing that information to the users, basically. So we will prompt you, and then you have to do the update. And hopefully when you do the updates, then you can feed it to your software manager to configure the correction streams and eventually to your users. Yeah.
Oh, great. I think it's a great tool, and I think anybody that's running an RTN ought to be interested in this alignment tools. They should be looking at their data, and I'm sure they are. They've got their own methods of doing it, but I think that this is a pretty nice way of looking at it. Any other questions from anybody before? I really appreciate you guys, both of you, taking the time to do this session with us. Are there any other questions that people have for both Chase as well as William before we close? Well, I don't see anybody jumping up and down. So thank you, Chase and William, for giving great presentations of a lot of valuable information. Really appreciate it. We'll close the session now.